Today, we're diving into one of the greatest American mysteries of all time. We're talking about the only unsolved skyjacking in the country's history. A case so wild, so audacious, it's become a modern legend that's still talked about over 50 years later.
And really, it all boils down to this one simple question. How did a guy on Thanksgiving Eve in 1971 pull off one of the most daring heists you can imagine and then just disappear into thin air? Let's get into it.
You know, the best place to start this story is actually at the end, at the very climax, the exact moment D.B. Cooper vanished and the legend was born. So I want you to picture this, a Boeing 727 flying right through a massive storm over the deep, dark forests of the Pacific Northwest.
Suddenly, inside the cockpit, a warning light starts flashing. It's for the rear stairwell. This was a special feature on the 727 that, believe it or not, could be opened in the middle of a flight. The tail of the plane lurches up, a jolt so obvious the crew knows exactly what just happened. Someone has just jumped out into that raging storm. The captain gets on the intercom, asks if Cooper is okay, but the only answer he gets is the roar of the wind.
So when the plane finally touches down in Reno, authorities are ready. They storm the cabin, expecting a standoff. But there's nobody there. The hijacker, the ransom money, his bomb, all of it just gone. Vanished into the night.
To really get how he vanished, though, we've got to rewind a few hours. Let's go back to Portland, Oregon, on November 24th, 1971. Because this whole incredible heist, it started in the most ordinary, unassuming way you could possibly imagine.
A man who looks like any other guy on a business trip gets on Northwest Orient Flight 305. He's probably in his mid-40s, wearing a dark raincoat over a suit. He sits down, orders a bourbon and soda, lights up a cigarette, and then casually passes a note to the flight attendant. She just thinks, he's giving her his number, so she slips it into her purse without even looking.
But then he leans in and very calmly, almost politely, says this. And it's that quiet confidence, That's what made it so terrifying. So she opens the note, and then he cracks open his briefcase, just enough for her to see these rows of red sticks and a mess of wires. The hijacking had officially begun.
And his demands were so specific. Not just cash, but American cash. And this is the really clever part. Not one parachute, but 4. Think about that. By asking for 4, he made sure the authorities couldn't just give him a broken one, because how would they know which one he'd use? They didn't even know if he might force a hostage to jump with them. It was a brilliant move.
And let's be real about the money here. That $200,000 back in 1971, that's like asking for over $1 million today. So yeah, this was a very serious heist.
Okay, so Cooper jumps, and what follows is the biggest and longest manhunt in American history. But right from the get-go, the whole investigation was just, it was a mess of bad info and some seriously bad luck.
And here's a perfect example of that chaos. We all know him as D.B. Cooper, right? Well, get this. That wasn't his name. The hijacker told everyone his name was Dan Cooper. But in the frenzy to break the story, a reporter misheard it, and D.B. Cooper went to print. The name just stuck. The legend had a name, even though it was the wrong one.
Now this is one of the biggest puzzles in the whole case. Of the 4 parachutes they gave him, one was a modern, steerable civilian parachute. It was by far the best of the bunch, but he left it on the plane. Instead, he jumped with an older military-style chute, and, this is the crazy part, a sewn-shut training dummy that was completely useless. So what does that mean? Was he an amateur who made a fatal mistake? Or was he an expert who knew something we don't? Some people say a military chute is actually more durable for a jump into a forest. Who knows? We just don't have the answer.
The FBI, they had a nearly impossible task ahead of them. They weren't exactly sure when he jumped. They didn't know precisely where he jumped. The weather was so bad that the fighter jets tailing the 727 couldn't see a thing, and its potential landing zone was thousands of square miles of some of the roughest, toughest terrain in North America. So for 9 years, the case goes completely cold. I mean, nothing. No body, no parachute, no sign of the money. And then, in 1980, a young boy out on a family trip stumbles upon something that blows the whole case wide open again.
Think about that. For 9 long years, total silence. The FBI had photographed the serial number of every single bill they gave him, but not one of those bills ever showed up anywhere.
The case was completely frozen in time.
An 8-year-old boy named Ryan Ingram is digging a fire pit on a sandy stretch of the Columbia River, and he finds these 3 rotting bundles of cash. They check the serial numbers, and it's a perfect match. It was Cooper's money.
Now you'd think this was it, right? The big break everyone had been waiting for. But in true D.B. Cooper fashion, this clue, well, it only made the whole mystery even deeper.
And here's where it gets really weird. Geologists studied the sand and the sediment where the money was found, and they concluded that those bundles of cash could not have been there since 1971. The evidence showed they probably washed ashore much, much later. So, how did they get there? Did Cooper drop some of the money during the jump? Did he bury it and it washed out later? Again, the only real piece of evidence just gave them a whole new set of questions. All right, so this all leads us to the biggest question of all, the one that keeps this whole legend alive. What actually happened to D.B. Cooper? Really, the entire debate comes down to 2 main possibilities. Okay, so in one corner, you've got the he died theory. And honestly, it seems pretty logical. He jumped into a freezing storm at 10,000 feet, wearing a business suit, with a 50-50 shot of having picked a useless parachute. The odds were not in his favor. But then you have the he survived camp. They point out his calm demeanor, his knowledge of the plane, and the fact that not one single trace of him, his parachute, or his briefcase was ever found. And hey, the money was found, so somebody got away with it, at least for a while. You know, over the decades, the list of potential suspects has grown to be hundreds of people long. These are just a few of the most popular names that come up. And for every single one, there are these amazing little clues that seem to point right at them. But every time after the FBI looked into it, the theories just fell apart. As of today, every single major suspect has been officially ruled out by the Bureau. And then, in 2016, after 45 years of chasing shadows, the FBI made it official. They suspended the active D.B. Cooper investigation. They said the resources were better spent on current cases. And just like that, D.B. Cooper officially became a ghost. His case file closed, but the mystery completely unsolved.
So that's where we're left. Who was this guy? Was he some master criminal, an expert skydiver who pulled off the perfect crime and lived out his days on a beach somewhere? Or was he just an arrogant fool who jumped to his death in the wilderness? Or maybe, just maybe, he was a phantom, part of some bigger plot, a ghost who was never really there to begin with. The truth, just like Cooper himself, is still out there, somewhere in the dark.